All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the second monthly meeting in our community engagement series for the housing department. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And on today's meeting, we're going to be focusing on the moderate income and workforce housing strategy. This is a draft strategy that the city is putting together. And in a moment, I'm going to hand it over to Eric Sullivan, our director, and he's going to walk you through the draft policy that we're putting together. And at the end of Eric's presentation, we will have time for you to ask questions and offer comments. And as we did last time, and as we will do each month, please submit your questions via the chat. You can send them to me via the chat. And I will ask those questions of Eric, and we will go through as many as possible. And as we did last month, there were a couple of questions that we didn't have time to get to, and I sent the responses afterwards to the people who had asked those questions. We will do that again, but our goal is to get through all of the questions, or as many as possible. With that, Eric, I'll turn it over to you, and then I will share my screen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff had mentioned, this is our second series as we're going through our new outreach medium here to get to a consistent dialogue with all of our broader community of residents interested in the work that we're doing. So for today's session, with the staff across multiple departments, but primarily in housing, has put together a draft moderate income workforce housing strategy. And we're going to talk through three components today. First, defining what we mean by moderate income and who is that demographic that, as under the housing element, we are charged with devising a strategy to serve. Then two, we'll talk about some of those challenges within the housing sphere that impacts this particular demographic. And then three, briefly outline what are some of our proposed solutions and strategies to address their housing needs. And then at the end of this presentation, as Jeff had mentioned, we'll then open it up to questions, answers, comments, give us new ideas we didn't think about, ways to expand some of the current ideas, ways to improve or amend the ideas we're putting forth, as we are then looking to bring this forward to council sometime in the next 60 days as we're wrapping up and getting more community feedback on the process. And so that's our goal for this second round of our community meetings. And so next slide, we'll jump right in here. So when we talk about moderate income, we're going to first talk about sort of the definitions, as I mentioned, as to what is the demographic we're looking to serve and how they fit into the overall community of residents throughout San Jose that the housing department in the city is looking to serve. So next slide. So first is, under the housing element, we are charged with serving a broad range of AMIs. So strategy 15 here under the housing element talks about what is our strategies, what are our solutions, what are the ways in which we are looking to engage with our moderate income households throughout the city, and we'll define what that is here. And what are the necessary changes we need to be making, updates to zoning, general plan, and execution of our work around serving moderate income households. And I'll contextualize this also within our regional housing needs. So we know by 2031, we have to produce 62,000 units. A subset of that 62,000 is the roughly 10,000 units we need to produce to better serve our moderate income households, who we're also kind of interplaying around workforce. We have a broad and diverse workforce in San Jose. And our moderate income workforce, as you'll see in the next slide here, really also encompasses a lot of our public employees as well. So in the next slide, this is how we're defining moderate income and how that fits within our particular workforce of our public employees as just being a segment of the global workforce we're looking to serve within moderate incomes. So the moderate income for a family of four based on our AMI ranges of 81% to 120%, puts you at a salary range, an income range for that family of four at roughly 145,000 up to about 217,000. To put that within context, the average San Jose city employee is at a salary of roughly 115,000. And here in the housing department, our staff, non-management staff, go up to salaries of roughly about $155,000. So we're really talking about an area of our housing market, a subsection of our residents in San Jose who make up a portion of our workforce, our public employees, our firefighters, our police officers, our city employees, our librarians, our legal analysis. That is kind of the demographic that we are targeting here. And the table at the below then breaks down what those categories look like from a one-person household up through a four-person household. So at the low end for a one-person household, it's roughly a salary of about $100,000. And that captures an even broader array of private sector workforce employees who are just trying to make ends meet and looking for ways in which to reduce some of their ever-increasing cost of living increases that have been experienced here in the Bay Area and then specifically in San Jose, as well as their cost of housing. At the other end of the scale, at a four-person household, and we'll talk a little bit more about the average demographics of our moderate income households, but at the four-person end of the scale, you're roughly looking at the high end of about $217,000 a year. So our public employees, our police officers, our firefighters, our librarians, our city housing department staff is falling right in the middle of that range. And so where do we look at creating more opportunities for not just our public employees, but also our private sector employees who fit within this moderate income demographic? So the next slide here then gets into a little more specificity when we talk about what are their affordability needs. So homeownership is one area where it is a bit out of reach given where our average home sale prices are, which at this point is roughly about $1.6 million per unit. So when you look at that income range of moderate income, housing affordability at the homeownership range is inaccessible. And so when we break this down, you can then see that differential between renter occupied and owner occupied. Roughly 45% of our moderate income families are renters, 55% are owners, and that total world of serviceability that we're looking to target is about 59,000 who fit within this range of moderate income to which we're looking to devise strategies to improve their areas of affordability and build out more units. In the end, through all the strategies and all the different segments of the AMI scale that the housing department looks to serve, we need to produce more units. This group is no different. And so what the next slide then gets into is start further refining a little more detail about this strategy. First, the demographic makeup of our moderate income households is roughly a bit bigger than our lower income or our above moderate income households at roughly 3 persons per size. So when you look at that and you think through our previous slide, where that salary range, it's really a salary range of closer to about 145 to roughly about 200,000, where you're getting a family of 3 in the city who is ever increasing rates of rental as home ownership becomes increasingly less accessible and affordable. And so the next slide provides additional demographic details. Our moderate income households represent the broad diversity that the city of San Jose has, mirroring our similar populations at both lower and higher on the AMI scales. As you can see from this chart, our Hispanic population demographics, white, Black, and Indigenous persons in the moderate income roughly mirror where they are throughout other segments of the AMI scale. The next slide provides further additional information. Here we looked at cost burden. What are the cost burdens for housing of this demographic? And we see roughly 20% of that 59,000 total families in this targeted demographic are cost burdened, similar to other AMIs across the scale, with obviously the most of our AMI scales at the lower end who are cost burdened. This group is no different, as they are traditionally paying over 30% of their household incomes for rent, and homeownership remains unaffordable. The next slide provides a bit more definition, and as we look through what are the challenges, given that demographic makeup, that this segment of our population here in San Jose is facing. So the next slide then just summarizes it. Here are the 6 top housing challenges that the moderate income families are facing. One is, last year we had 0 market rate multifamily starts, which means on the primary market rate housing that our moderate income families take residency in, there was no new production in 2024. Thereby, the supply continues to be constrained. Second, that reduction in supply means our overall rental rates continue to increase. And as we look at strategies for furthering the production of more units across the scale, particularly at the lower end of the AMI scale, our cost per unit for production for both market rates and in affordable housing continue to go up. So we have the challenge of low production, and the production that needs to get underway is ever increasing in costs. Therefore, we have families who are at our moderate income levels who are effectively buying down in the rental market. They're taking units because of the lack of supply that were originally targeted at lower income families. So we are compressing the amount of supply available from moderate income all the way down to lower income families, because there isn't production at the higher income range more suitable to the moderate income families. And so that rental buy down is further exacerbating the unaffordability because we're reducing our overall housing stock. On our housing department website, you will see we just released the Q4 market rate update on housing status in the city of San Jose, which also included our year-over-year comparisons. And you'll see that amongst our Class A properties, overall vacancy is just about the same from 23 to 24. But our Class C properties, which is our lower end properties, our older properties, that vacancy rate is now dipping below 4%, which evidences that we're having more and more families at higher ends of our income scale who are in the rental market, buying down, taking existing affordable housing stock because we don't have enough production at the higher end, and they can't transition into home ownership units because the supply continues to be compressed. One of the other challenges to that transference of rental to home ownership is the cost of home ownership. So we have continuing high mortgage rates. We have low unit turnover, as during the pandemic and post-pandemic period, many homeowners were able to get very low interest rates, 3% and below, because interest rates for FMOC rates were hovering around 0 to 1%. And so they're less likely to sell their properties. Therefore, there's less homes being turned over in the marketplace, and therefore less supply. So we have both lower production of total housing units, and those units that are available for sale, less are coming on to the market. Therefore, more moderate income families are now buying down other rents, further increasing prices while we have a low amount of supply. This limited home ownership opportunities also means that our moderate income households are continuing to increase the overall cost in the aggregate of the rental prices across the city. And some of our inventory and production limits also hinder sort of the financeability of other production types. Meaning, as we look at ways to expand the types of home ownership, condos, townhomes, other products that can be brought online, other than the 80% or more of single family product that makes up the majority of the city of San Jose's housing stock, we're coming up against these headwinds from the financing side, from the production side, from the mortgage side, from the lack of general supply, as less individuals are willing to put their homes up for sale because they have low interest loans. And therefore, as we look at public subsidies to try to push forward at the lower AMI scale to expand supply, at the higher end scale, as we look to bring on incentives and waivers and fee waivers to look to expand production, those only go so far because there are just market forces that are limiting our overall ability to get to more units and to convert more renters into homeowners and to get access to mortgages. So the next slide here then gets into sort of our missing middle housing, which is just an example of some of the challenges that we are experiencing. So as you see, within the diversity of housing stock, this going from duplexes all the way to sort of live work, this is a picture that demonstrates some of the typology and types of product that we need to expand in order to build out more housing for our moderate income households. And looking at that missing middle is what it's commonly called, and throughout the state and throughout the country, this missing middle housing is what creates more opportunity for our public sector employees, for our private sector employees in that income band to get more affordability in their housing in the city of San Jose. And so what this picture shows is here's all those different types that we could look at fostering an environment to spur more creation of this type of housing product. And so our next slide then goes into what are some of the strategies we're looking to proffer and how do we look to address these issues of affordability for our moderate income households. And so the next slide begins with the first set. Let's look at ways that we can continue to innovate on our ADU program. The Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department has done tremendous work in creating a best practice in how to build out an ADU program in the city of San Jose. How do we continue to push that forward? Where do we look for models to expand homeownership of ADUs to help service our moderate income households? Two, in looking at our inclusionary housing ordinances, how do we revise our regulations so we could streamline some of the execution of units that are going to meet that AMI band for which we're targeting for moderate income and get more units under production? And so we're going to be looking at within the housing department, where do we make revisions to our regulatory framework for the inclusionary housing ordinance that aligns to where the March budget message was as passed by council 2 weeks ago to look for flexibility as well as more streamlining within the regulations for administering the inclusionary housing ordinance. Three, we're looking at continuing ways to expand approval times and predictability and get into more production of homes and utilizing different product types such as modular. Today, the city has a number of different projects that are utilizing stackable modular that brings down your cost per unit and gets to a quicker execution during the construction period and has the added benefit of being at a lower cost. So where do we continue to expand and improve our times for processing across the city to bring on these alternative types of product styles? The next slide gets into the next set here, which is then continuing to look at ADU density bonus programs, ways in which we can support construction defect laws so we can bring that product type of condominiums to more fruition within the city of San Jose. One of the challenges being is the existing state law has this builder's liability defect that carries on for a 10-year period. Where do we look at strategies to try to mitigate, reduce those limits so that way we can encourage more developers to bring that product type of condominiums to market so we can further expand the total amount of supply that's available for home ownership for moderate income families. And then last, as talked about in the previous picture, our missing middle workforce. How do we look at that entire breadth of typologies from our duplexes all the way through our condos, our mixed income multifamily with home ownership to bring on more production of all different types in order to build out more affordability within our housing market to allow for more transfer of moderate income families from rental into home ownership, thereby decompressing some of the supply constraints within our rental market, which will eventually look to decrease our rents because more supply will be available for a broader array of incomes. So this is just a short list of what our proposed actions and strategies we're looking for in order to address some of the needs of our moderate income households. And now, as Jeff had mentioned at the top, we welcome your thoughts and feedback, questions, ideas, things we need to think about. What are other ways in which we can add to this strategy, expanded, amended? Give us some of your thoughts and feedbacks as we're looking forward to bringing this to council to frame up how it is we can expand housing affordability options for our moderate income households. Now, hand it back over to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Eric, for the presentation. So as I said at the top, if you have questions or comments you'd like to speak, please submit your questions or comments in the chat. If you can send them to me in the chat, to Jeff Scott, that would be ideal. And then I can go ahead and I can read those questions out loud, and Eric and our staff can go ahead and answer them. Let me let's see. All right, so Eric, if you're ready, I have the first question here for you. Is the city looking at buying empty or foreclosed condos at auction and then reselling them as mod income opportunities?
That's an interesting question. That is not something we have looked at in the past, but if there is an inventory of achievable price points for vacant units that we can acquire and then flip, working with our various set of public-private partnerships, we will certainly look to kind of consider that. So that's a good idea, and we'll look to explore that further for possible inclusion within the plan.
And Eric, just to comment on that as well, the person who asked the question also said that the city could also consider renting those condos at first if they're not ready to start selling those condos, or if there's not a market for buyers for those condos.
Okay,
so
great. Yeah.
All right. Then the next question here, I'm trying to interpret it. There's some shorthand. It looks like, is the city considering offering moderate income families subsidies, grants, loans, etc., to try to help them in the purchase process?
Yes, so we're looking at expanding our first-time homebuyer program for which our moderate income families sort of fit into that demographic look. So how do we look to do that to both accomplish two things? One is buying down the cost of closing cost and providing that first-time homebuyer assistance would help increase affordability, because that tends to be a barrier in terms of down payment assistance for those looking to transition from rental into home ownership for the first time and have an income sufficient to get a 30-year mortgage. Where do we play a role in expanding that? And then two, in addition to first-time homebuyer assistance, we're also looking at strategies for how to build out and support the creation of more homeownership type units, whether that is a townhome form or a condo form. Where do we provide and create as part of mixed income developments that are coming forward? And we've got about just over 100 townhomes, or maybe 150 townhomes already in production. Good percentage of those are going to be affordable restricted. So where do we continue to advance some of those strategies to add more supply for this income bracket?
All right, Eric, the next question is more focused on the cost of these programs to the city. So just try to get several parts to the question. Starting with, do we have or will we have a basic budget for this that we will be able to share with the public? Also, how many people do we estimate would be eligible for this type of a mod income program? I know you mentioned the total universe of 59,000, but if we know how many people might actually be eligible to participate in something like this, and then kind of generally, what might the cost be to the city to implement a full mod income strategy? And then lastly, do we have a source of funds to pay for these types of programs?
Okay, so these strategies proposed, so a good set of questions there. The strategies proposed do not require any form of public subsidy for execution. They were intentionally designed to look at primarily process improvements, to look at ways in which the city can offer non-cash incentives to developers to build more product of this type, and where the city is already investing in a first-time homebuyer program, which we do over the last couple of years, and continue to expand that to a degree, primarily with other funds received not tapping into the general fund. We will continue to pursue those options. Some of the limitations that we have in servicing the affordability needs of this population is that most of city subsidy and public funds go to lower AMI production. So for this particular scale point in the AMI scale, we're looking at identifying strategies through this draft plan that don't require direct public subsidy and require instead process improvements, other ways in which we can provide incentives to developers that do not require a cash outlay.
Great. Next question, and I understand this is a draft strategy. I just want to reiterate that for everyone listening. But Eric, do we foresee if these programs, if the strategy gets off the ground and it's approved by the city council, will households have to do anything to qualify for this type of housing? Would they have to have like some sort of income qualification or some sort of other eligibility, or would this just be open to the market?
So for this draft strategy and what we're bringing to the market, since we're not designing a fund investment, i.e. city funds going into a particular strategy or going into a particular development, these strategies are focused on process improvements, are focused on incentives within existing programs that don't have a particular sort of financial component to them. As an example, as I mentioned, inclusionary housing waiver regulatory updates. That's not a financial commitment by the city. That is, we've looked at our regulations, how do we streamline them? And just applying staff time to thinking through ways in which to better administer the program. So there isn't necessarily something for units to qualify for. It's more of those developers who are bringing ideas for new production. How do we streamline? How do we create new ways of thinking about application of existing programs? And then three, how do we utilize some of our existing work, as an example, through incentives? And one of the incentive examples is in December, City Council passed the Growth Areas Incentive Program, which then provided an opportunity to waive some existing fees and taxes to catalyze some projects into production. So the strategies and the focus of this work has been on non-monetary cash outlays and more on where do we look at process improvements, because the majority, overwhelming majority of our cash outlays as a city goes to lower AMI scales.
Ready? The next is kind of a comment and question. This person is excited and supportive of the idea of re-legalizing things like bungalow courts and courtyard apartments. And their question for you is, how do we plan on legalizing these housing types? Would it be through a general plan update or an ordinance or something else?
So we will explore, and that's part of the language within this. How do we do that? How do we execute that as we see it as an opportunity to consider a broader array of that missing middle typology? And where do we look at ways in which to insert that into our general plan? So that's part of the charge of this, is exploring what that would look like and what does execution and administration look like.
Okay, and I'll just share an additional comment about that. This person says that they'd like to see mid-density housing in enough places to make a significant impact, and then they recommend legalizing these kind of 4 to 10 unit structures near urban villages and along transit lines.
Okay.
Okay, next question. Are there any efforts on the other end to push for an increase in wages for people to move them up from the moderate income level, either up into the moderate income level or above the moderate income level?
The housing department, we do run 2 workforce training programs. They're primarily programs designed for those who are transitioning out of homelessness. And then the Office of Economic Development runs a program to provide skills up for more individuals to increase their overall AMI scales. When we produce the answers, Jeff, let's put links into each of those programs from the website.
All righty. And next question, a person would like you to elaborate on what you're talking about with a density bonus, especially, I guess, as it relates to ADUs.
So one of the things we're exploring is with the fantastically designed ADU program that the city is now becoming a best practice on, where do we look at further refinements to the execution administration of that program? Where do we look at ways to bring about a homeownership component? We have a lot to kind of consider and, pardon me, and think through. Where do we look at ways to putting more ADUs kind of in the backyard if we're able to get to that homeownership component? Because whether that's a rental feature or homeownership feature, or it's condoed out, it could be some good income generating to increase affordability for all residents sort of on that plot. So it's a number of different strategies we're going to look to explore to continue to expand and improve that program.
All right, I'll move on to the next one, and I'll just again reiterate, don't mean to sound like a broken record here, but this is a draft plan that we're sharing with everyone here. This is not a done deal. This has not gone to the city council for consideration yet. So we welcome all your comments and feedback. All right, so the next question, is the city planning on doing more to help with reducing fees, like permitting fees and removing red tape, the sort of process improvements that I think you've alluded to, Eric? Do we have more that we're looking to do in that area to remove or reduce fees and reduce red tape?
Correct. And those are part of their overall kind of process improvements where, again, doesn't require an allocation of funds. It's where do we look at existing processes? Where do we look at the cost of those existing processes and associated fees and get you some streamlining and quicker execution?
Okay. Just one other comment related to that was about maybe reducing community benefit requirements. So, and just so everyone knows, I do have a transcript of all the comments and questions, and so all of this will be passed along to Eric in its entirety after we're done with this. Just want everyone to know that none of your comments or questions are going to be lost to the ether after this Zoom is done. Okay, next is a comment, and this person says that some older residents are not selling or moving because capital gains taxes that they might pay that can be as high as 45% of their equity, and the comment here is that cities might want to think about pressing state and encouraging them to change capital gains tax laws. So I just wanted to share that comment.
Okay.
All right, next one is a kind of a comment and question. It's about the general plan. It says that over 4,700 acres were to be in urban villages. Quite like 4,700 acres were to be in 60 or so urban villages. But this commenter says those are proving to be expensive to build. And it has turned out, according to this commenter, that some of that land doesn't attract developers at the current densities. And so the question here is, why doesn't the city reduce the required density in those areas that maybe won't support 55 units per acre? Maybe at 25 units per acre, more land would be developable. That's the question.
A good point raised. So we'll take that, notated that as well as something to look at.
Okay, another one, and this might be outside of our realm, but I'll share it. So this question is, have we looked at expanding Prop 13 incentives?
Okay.
And if the city, the county, the state keep the tax base as an incentive to increase the house from 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. But anyway, I'm not going to get into all the math that this person included here. I'll share it with you offline, Eric. But
Okay.
the question is, are we looking at expanding the Prop 13 incentives?
So, well, again, that's Prop 13 is state law for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, that capped what is the total amount of property taxes that can be levied on certain types of homes. The city is not pushing forward any agenda related to Prop 13. At this time, I have not seen any new legislation from the legislature to address sort of Prop 13 issues, but we are aware that Prop 13, you know, for some households sort of artificially holds down some of the potential revenue generation that can be had from those homes that can then feed into and support some of our strategies across the AMI scale.
Okay, next question. Not sure I understand all the jargon here, but maybe Eric, you can help me sort it out. So it says, this person says they've worked with other cities to provide silent seconds. I believe they're talking about second mortgages, to provide silent seconds that are repaid at sale of properties with the condition that the sale goes to qualified affordable buyers. Would the city of San Jose consider this method for mid-level housing sales?
Yes, absolutely. So we'd welcome to get more information about that. So if the contributor of the comment can, you know, send Jeff an email, and I think we have a housing email, Jeff, that they can send to, we welcome to kind of learn more about that program.
Yeah, I'll drop the email. The general email is housingcoms with 2 M's, housingcoms@sanjoseca.gov. I'll stick that in the comment section. All right, next question or comment is, are there plans specific to teacher housing?
So I can speak to, right now we have no specific plans, but as I mentioned, public employees who fit within this moderate income demographic, that would also include teachers. So my wife is a teacher here in the city of San Jose, and her annual income fits within this target of incomes that we are looking at to service this demographic. So, and I know that there was recently passed a bond through San Jose Unified School District, and they are looking for and are beginning their process of building out more units based on some school district lands. So that's certainly sort of an area where we want to encourage. We've offered any kind of support we can provide as the city housing department to that process, as the school district is looking to bring on more supply in order to add more affordability for our school teachers.
Alrighty, next question. If some of these strategies get implemented and some of this housing starts to get built, these housing types, would people who either live in San Jose or work in San Jose have a preference? Would they have first dibs, or would they would there be any plan to try to ensure that applicants would already live or work in the city of San Jose?
So we have our tenant preferences policy that City Council adopted last year, that we're devising the regulations around that, and how do we implement that alongside some of our new production coming online, with the intention of providing more housing production for those who currently live in San Jose in particular neighborhoods, so they are not displaced. So that's the long answer for yes, we're trying to see how do we merge those interests of residents looking to move to other rental or move into home ownership with our policies around stabilizing families within their areas of existing living.
Okay, next question. This person says that they'd like the city to adopt ministerial approvals for all infill housing, regardless of whether the development has affordable housing units. And I don't know if that is a comment. I don't know if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, that is entirely in planning, building, code enforcement's lane, but we'll certainly kind of share that as we're going through the drafting process.
All right. Okay, another comment here. We should allow 2 to 4 unit homes or structures to be built on all single family zoned areas. And this person is saying, even though SB 9 attempted to legalize this, the owner occupancy requirement stops these homes from being built by developers and sold as separate homes. Can San Jose, here's the question, losing it. Can San Jose work with developers to understand the requirements that are stopping these 2 to 4 unit structures from being built and implemented?
Oh, that's a good question. That is something we can look to explore. What would be essentially an avenue of intervention by the municipality under that state law? So Jeff, let's notate that and see what some opportunities are there, if any.
Okay, great. So right now, I believe that I've gone through all the questions. I know I've gotten some additional questions from people who want things to be read verbatim. Just so you know, when I'm seeing multiple questions that are similar, I'm paraphrasing, and that's what I'm asking Eric to respond to. But if there are any additional questions, we still have some time here, and I know Eric would be happy to answer more questions. Okay, so I'm just going through one more time, Eric, to make sure I'm not overlooking any questions.
Sure.
This person had kind of a question or comment. I think this gets to I think when you were talking about rent burden or housing cost burden, I think the number we use is 30% of the income or gross income is what we used to determine whether someone was housing cost burdened or not. And this person doesn't know that 30% is necessarily the most realistic figure. Maybe you can explain where that number came from and why we use that to determine housing cost
Right.
burden.
So 30% of household income has been a policy set by HUD for nearly a generation. So it goes back almost well over 30 years at this point. As cities across the country have continued to struggle, including San Jose, with housing affordability and what is that most appropriate amount of average income that our families should pay into. The question about whether 30% as a total cost of your household's housing cost is still an accurate number has been an area of debate that's growing now. Since housing throughout the country, particularly since the 08-09 financial collapse, has become more expensive because of a lack of supply, and then the cost of building more housing, both on the home ownership side and the rental side, this is now going to become likely an open area of debate as to whether or not 30% is realistic, as most households nationwide are probably close to 35, 40%. And there isn't a foreseeable reduction in that until our country is able to produce well over 2 million units a year. Right now, nationwide, we produce about 1 million housing units throughout the country. At the same time, we lose in terms of unit losses about 1 million a year as well. So we're not, for all the hundreds of thousands of rental units as well as homeownership units that have come online since the financial collapse and sort of the recovery of the housing production market, we have lost nearly about the same. So our net gains aren't really making a dent into the problem. Without supply, we're not going to get to reductions of cost. And so now there is a growing amount of debate, and we could put up some of those articles about whether or not is 30% still the mark. That mark goes back 30 years when HUD had originally set those limits. And so I think it is a good question and a question worth of exploring, particularly amongst housing experts, given the state of where a housing market is, not just in San Jose, but in cities around and towns and in rural areas around the country.
Okay, so we do have a couple more. One is for me. So the one person is saying, are we going to be sharing this meeting and this presentation online? The answer is yes. And I just shared in the chat the link that is where we are going to be posting all of the materials from all of our meetings. So the materials from this meeting will be up in the next day or two. And when they are up, they will be at that link. That link is also where you will find all the materials from last month's meeting. And so every month we will continue to add to that so that we have we memorialize everything that we discuss in these meetings. Let's see here. Another person, we do have another question for you, Eric, and that is if you can talk about some of the people that some of the groups that the city staff is meeting with as you develop this mod income strategy. For example, are you meeting with developers, landlords? What types of groups are you meeting with to gather their input?
We're going to begin searching as we began this today, sort of doing some outreach to get some input. So we hope to get a broad array of input, developers, homeowners, residents, to further refine and improve what we have drafted here today. So we'll look to follow up. If you want to share your email address, looking for further input. This today was an opening communication to the community at large. Here's what we're thinking. What are your thoughts? Improve the strategies, talk more internally, and continue some additional outreach.
All righty. I think that we've gone through all the questions. I'm not seeing any new questions now.
Yeah.
For everyone, I just put my email address in the chat. Also, there's also a response email. I think my email in the email blast that went out, the notification blast that went out to all of you that gave you the invitation to today's meeting. So you can find my email address in there as well as in the chat. And look for more emails from me in the near future as we start sending out invitations for next month's meeting, which will be on Thursday, May 1st, same time, 4 p.m. on Thursday, May 1st. Eric, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, we appreciate everyone's input as we're going through and building out this communication channel to the community at large. We welcome continued participation and questions as we're hoping to use this as a forum to share our work product that is in process, to get community impact, to get a broad array of voices and make it accessible to all communities, all interest groups, all organizations, advocates, and those who are furthering the city's mission of getting to abundant housing stock.
Great. And with that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We appreciate it.